From Washington, the McLaughlin Group, the American original. For over 2 decades, the sharpest minds, best sources, hardest talk.
We've provided a platform for success for some of the most respected companies in the country. We fueled their growth with a highly educated workforce and a can-do, pro-business attitude. Just ask our trusted business partner, Toyota. Visit Mississippi.org to see what we can do for you.
If, for such a small word, it packs a wallop. If I live to 100, if Social Security isn't enough, if my heart gets broken, if she says yes. We believe if should never hold you back. If should be managed with a plan that builds on what you already have. Together, we can create a personal safety net, a launching pad for all those brilliant ifs in the middle of life. You can call on our expertise and get guarantees for the if in life. After all, we're MetLife.
Issue 1, the desecration.
Our hearts really go out to the family right now and to the guard who was shot, and we appreciate all the support we're getting.
The shooting in Washington on Wednesday was a graphic example of the evil racism of the U.S. white supremacy movement and its ideology. It is also a manifestation, in this instance, of its poisonous anti-Semitism. It was not a black church with a white cross on its lawn that was bombed and incinerated. It was the Holocaust Memorial Museum that was attacked, whose contents are a wrenching reminder of the ghastly abominations of Auschwitz, Dachau, and the other 22 concentration camps. A gunman entered the building and opened fire. The gunman was later identified as James von Brunn. He shot and killed 39-year-old museum guard Stephen Tyrone Johns. Von Brunn himself was then shot by 2 other security guards. Von Brunn is 88 years old and has been a long-time white supremacist, anti-Semite, and Holocaust denier. He has been tracked for years by civil rights organizations. His website, now expunged, was filled with anti-Semitic diatribes charging that Jews had seized government and industry and exploited both. In 1981, von Brunn was arrested and sentenced to 11 years in jail for threatening to take hostage members of the U.S. Federal Reserve's Board of Governors. He served 6 years.
Question, does this attack on the Holocaust Museum point to a new outcropping of anti-Semitism in the U.S. and perhaps beyond? Mort?
Well, I doubt that, but somebody once said that all isms are now wasms. That is not the case when it comes to anti-Americanism or anti-Zionism or anti-Semitism. It may be the case for fascism and communism, but not to anti-Semitism. And it shows up in many different ways. Anti-Semitism used to be focused on the individual. If there is an anti-Semitism today, it is on the collective Jew rather than the individual Jew, and that is Israel. There's a great deal of prejudice against Israel, and it is not allowed to sort of behave in the way that other people are or other nations are. There's a double standard as it used to be implied to Jews. So I don't think that's true in the United States. Of all countries, this is a country where, because we are such an open society, with so many people from so many different countries, where people are able to make their own way, it's extraordinary. What is amazing about anti-Semitism, and it's implicit in this story, is the sense that somehow that the Jews are all powerful. They can run everything, whether it's this country or what have you. I remember once debating with a man from Hamas in Egypt, and he said, the Jews created the Soviet Union, they ruled the Soviet Union, they destroyed the Soviet Union, and the Jews, especially the Jewish press, control America. So I said to him, if the Jews control both the Soviet Union and America, how come we had the Cold War for 65 years? He looked at me and he said, they have their reasons. It's an unreasoning kind of prejudice, is all I can say.
The Anti-Defamation League does support your view that the United States anti-Semitism level has dropped. Eleanor?
Well, this Southern Anti-Poverty Law Center, which monitors hate groups and hate crimes, says that the number of hate groups has increased by 50% since the year 2000. And in April of this year, the Department of Homeland Security declassified a memo which basically predicted an upsurge in anti-government, anti-Semitic activity because of what they describe as almost a perfect storm. The first African-American president, severe economic downturn, and I think you could probably throw in the number of immigrants we have in the country and a lot of the attention that's been given to the illegal immigrants. And, you know, people, a certain segment of the population, a very small minority, you know, feels threatened and feels somehow that the rightness of their cause enables them to take justice into their own hands. And the killing at the Holocaust Museum does follow by just a few weeks the murder of the doctor who did do late-term abortions, which are legal in this country. So I hope there's not an upturn in all of this,
well,
but I think it bears watching.
But the point is, whether there's a rise not necessarily in anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism, but in just right-wing extremism, which is often localized and not a sort of a big collected, organized force. And so, amongst right-wing extremists, their culture is the power of the deed. That is, one person can take action and others will pick up their guns and do the same thing. And so my question is whether the killing of Dr. George Tiller in any way, the guy who killed him used to be in part of the white supremacist movement before he became an anti-abortion extremist, whether that at all motivated James von Brunn to take action himself.
We're not talking about a wave of white ring violence or extremism. Remember, the last 2 weeks, we had the shooting death of Private William Long, a United States military man who was standing outside a military recruitment center in Little Rock, Arkansas, by a Muslim in this country. Now, that was an act of terrorism. In fact, that was an act of war. And yet, I didn't hear anybody in the press refer to his radical Islamic background in the way that you guys are saying, well, we might have a wave of right-wing violence.
I don't think it is limited. I don't think it is limited to right wing or left wing.
I'm going to keep talking. Domestic terrorism is at least a greater threat to this country as domestic terrorism is at least a greater threat to this country as Islamic terrorism.
Okay.
Remember the Oklahoma bombings, homegrown terrorism.
Insane.
The U.S.
That is a crazy point. These were
analysis.
Tiller and the Holocaust were two homicides.
Please relinquish. Okay, the U.S.-Israeli relationship.
The shooting at the Holocaust Memorial Museum comes less than a week after Obama's Cairo speech. President Obama laid out in Cairo a new partnership between the United States and the Muslim world. In the same speech, Mr. Obama reaffirmed the U.S.-Israeli alliance.
America's strong bonds with Israel are well known. This bond is unbreakable.
But more than a few of President Obama's Cairo emphases appear to have jarred the Israelis' sensibility. First, Mr. Obama's definitive statement on the two-state solution for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Note the word only.
The only resolution is for the aspirations of both sides to be met through two states where Israelis and Palestinians each live in peace and security.
More jarring to many Israelis was President Obama's declaration of how U.S. policy frowns on continued and expanding Israeli settlements on territory Palestinians see as theirs.
The United States does not accept the legitimacy of continued Israeli settlements. This construction violates previous agreements and undermines efforts to achieve peace. It is time for these settlements to stop.
Some Israelis feel a sense of betrayal from these Obama emphases.
Yeah, there's a feeling of betrayal. We've had 6 decades of American presidents whose orientation was in our direction, and now I think that we're having to wake up.
Question, what is the impact of that quote-unquote betrayal? I ask you, Monica.
What Obama's doing is resetting American relations vis-a-vis Israel, and it's having a dramatic effect, it's cascading effect all across the Middle East and, frankly, the rest of the world. What he's doing, my perception of what he is doing, is it seems that Obama only has carrots for our enemies and sticks for our allies. When you look at the whole host of allies, Great Britain, France, Germany, Israel, Japan, and South Korea with regard to North Korea. It does seem as if he is really putting our allies in a box, and with particular regard to Israel, because the Iranians now are working so hard and so fast to get a nuclear weapon, the Israelis feel betrayed.
The Iranians are in the middle of a dramatic election. We don't know the results as we're taping this show, but it's a very different Iran from the one caricature that some people are painting. And secondly, the settlements have been illegal in the eyes of U.S. policy for decades. This is not new policy, and polls show that a majority of Israelis support the president on this issue because they do see stopping settlement activity as the only way to create a peaceful pathway.
Most of the allies that you just mentioned have been long harder on settlements than we have. So the United States, if anything, is catching up with this, and it's a point that, you know, in which he isn't on the side with the Israeli public.
But there is a real problem in what he has said, and basically what he has said is somehow or other both parties are responsible for where they are now. But the Israelis and the United Nations and the Peel Commission have offered the Palestinians a state for decades, from 1936, 1948, 1960, 1980, and the reason for the Palestinian condition is primarily because their leadership does not recognize the opportunities that they've had, including the recent one with oil.
The Israelis the justification to keep building settlements, which only cause more of a problem.
Please relinquish. Does this Obama-Cairo statement on Iran have an impact on Israel?
Any nation, including Iran, should have the right to access peaceful nuclear power if it complies with its responsibilities under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty.
Question, does the statement put Obama at odds with Netanyahu? Now, Netanyahu, he was visiting Obama, and he said he put the word military in, nuclear military development. But it seemed odd that he did that. Well, and I wonder whether Obama extracted that from Netanyahu on his visit. Well, that's leaving, perhaps telling him, look, we're not going to outlaw civilian nuclear electricity. Well, now, you know that it has been the unstated position of Israel, correct me if I'm wrong, that Iran should not be allowed to develop any kind of nuclear energy.
That's not the case. I mean, the Israelis, of course, feel you cannot separate the ability to develop peaceful nuclear capabilities in Iran from military nuclear capabilities. Anybody who's followed what Iran has been doing knows that this is just a cover for what they really intend.
Well, I think
so that's the
That
difference. That
is
the
bottom line.
The United States policy has always been they are entitled to have peaceful nuclear capabilities if we can make sure that they are controlled. Nobody believes they can be controlled.
Iran also signed the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty. Israel did not.
That's correct.
India gets help from us on its nuclear power. India did not sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty.
Yes, but we do not worry that India is going to launch nuclear attacks on their allies or on our allies, frankly.
My point is, do you think that Israel is going to take an action if there is any kind of a nuclear plant over there?
No,
listen, this is all going to change a lot. You know,
what is going to change?
This could all change a lot depending on what happens after the elections in Iran. And, you know, there could be...
Why do you say that?
That's
not the case.
Well,
the foreign policy of that country is determined by...
There are millions of Iranians who obviously, regardless of who wins, there are millions of Iranians we've seen who want a different relationship with the West. That is undeniable now. We talk about Iran as if it's just a cartoon state.
They're also broke. They have inflation. They want to sell their oil, and they want to generate electricity through nuclear power.
Which gives a lot of leverage to the West that they play it
for. Question. If the Arab-Israeli issue is settled, Arab-Israeli issue, will that settlement diminish anti-Semitism around the world?
For sure.
Yes, but I want to add that the mistrust of Iran by Israel would make it very unlikely that they would support even peaceful nuclear energy. But I agree with David that what we have seen in this election process in Iran signals greater engagement with the West on their part and greater engagement in return by the Obama administration. It's a new day. It may not be a perfect day.
It should be made clear that as we go to press with this show, it's very tight for Ahmadinejad.
Well, there's likely to be a runoff, I think. Even if Ahmadinejad wins, he will have gotten a severe challenge here.
Let's deal in reality. Let's deal in reality for a second here.
Please go.
Tehran calling.
Not only is he calling.
Let's go out, Monica. We got to get out. We got to get out.
My point. Let's deal in reality on Iran, okay? The 4 presidential candidates were hand-selected by the Mullah's Guardian Council. They are all hardline conservatives. They all want nuclear weapons. There is no such thing as moderation, and the Mullahs and the Ayatollah control the foreign policy.
Listen,
there will be no change.
Monica, you're talented, but you're not a mind reader, and you can't tell what is going to happen if there's a new government there. And do you want to make the case? Do you want to make the case that Israel is entitled to nuclear weapons and other states in the region are not? That Israel doesn't have to declare.
Yes,
Musavi is running against Ahmadinejad. Do you know anything about Musavi that suggests that he's anti-nuclear power?
No, none of them are anti-nuclear power. Nuclear power is supported by 70%.
You mean you trust Musavi in Iran?
No.
But you don't trust Ahmadinejad?
Well, no one trusts Ahmadinejad.
Well, I don't know about that. Issue 2, Sotomayor or Soto Supreme?
Sonia Sotomayor is a judge on the Federal Court of Appeals in New York. President Obama nominated her late last month to the Supreme Court. 8 years ago, she gave a long lecture at Berkeley Law School in California and said this, quote, "I would hope that a wise Latina woman with the richness of her experiences would more often than not reach a better conclusion than a white male who hasn't lived that life," unquote. This week, new videos surfaced in which Sotomayor describes her experience with affirmative action.
I am a product of affirmative action. I am the perfect affirmative action baby. I am a Puerto Rican, born and raised in the South Bronx. My test scores were not comparable to that of my colleagues at Princeton or Yale.
Question, does Judge Sotomayor have a problem, especially in view of the polling that says a majority of Americans, 55%, want affirmative action abolished? Monica Crowley.
I think she does have a problem. I mean, look, she's going to get through. The Democrats have the vote. She's going to be seated as a Supreme Court justice. The problem here is that part of Obama's appeal when he was running for president was that he was going to usher in a new era of post-racial, post-gender, post all of these identity political issues. And now we've got somebody up for the Supreme Court who is a racialist in the sense that she sees life, she sees the judiciary, she sees politics through the lens of her own race.
That's not what is the American way? The American way is to judge these situations on the merits of the candidate. The merits.
Right. And also,
we have a meritocracy here.
This is not the first
She's judging on the basis of race. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. And this is not. This is
Latina
based on these statements. Listen, there is a reason why judges wear black robes, because they're supposed to erase their identities and their backgrounds and their biases
and
bring
their
impartial judgment.
Let her finish. Will you let her finish?
She's going on.
All right, you're next, and then Ellen.
2 words. Clarence Thomas. Did his race have anything to do with his appointment?
Does his race factor into his judgments?
Wait a second. Answer that question first.
We're talking about Sonia Sotomayor. We're not talking about the decision-making that went into
and
choosing
Justice Ginsburg
her.
have both said that their backgrounds matter. You're Justice Alito saying that he, being the son of an immigrant...
Let's hear, wait a minute, Eleanor, I'm going to go right to you. I want to hear President Obama's own stated baseline for his own ideal Supreme Court nominee.
We need somebody who's got the heart to recognize, the empathy to recognize what it's like to be a young teenage mom. The empathy to understand what it's like to be poor or African American or gay or disabled or old.
President Obama is getting exactly what he wanted. That's his candidate, Sotomayor, according to his own definition. She's a perfect fulfillment of his expectation, correct?
She has the best credentials of anybody on the court. She's served longer in various different
things.
And there is at least one and maybe 2 people on this panel who are, excuse me, I get to finish, who are here because of affirmative action. It gives you a chance to get in the door and then you prove yourself. She's more than proven herself. And women don't have to apologize for wanting a seat at the table when they're more than half the population. And Hispanics
She happens to be an outstanding appointment, I think, and I have no problem with the standards with which Obama...
You would vote for it if you
I
were on the
absolutely would vote for her. She was a summa cum laude graduate of Princeton. She was on the law review at Yale. She was an excellent judge. You know, yes, she's going to have some prejudice, or not prejudice, some thinking or some perspective on the basis of her life. Every single one of the members of the court does. Nobody is immune to that, although I have to say she's not the most qualified judge on the bench, since I think Stephen Breyer, who is a very good personal friend of mine,
Do you think you could... Wait a minute, I want to ask this question.
Experience than he does as being a judge.
Can any of you defend that statement alone, on which she said a Latina would be better than a white male if you consider the composition of this court, which is 8-to-1 female.
8-to-1 male.
What?
8-to-1 male.
Excuse me, 8-to-1 males, and therefore another person with a different affect towards life would in fact be better just to make us feel that there is some rounded out court. I ask you.
Well, she's not going to defend it.
The court is not a petri dish for this kind of social engineering. I lack empathy when it comes to empathy on the court. That's not what the court is made for. It's made for impartial judgments. And those comments, and that
She's saying I'm traveling on 2 rails, not 1 rail. Right. 1 rail is gender. The other rail is my experience.
The law has no accommodation.
You would vote for. Would you vote for? You would vote for.
I would not.
I would like to quote.
Listen, every judge.
All right. Go ahead.
I want to quote Justice Alito, who in his confirmation hearings said that as the son of Italian immigrants, when he gets an immigration case, he can't help but think of his immigrant grandparents. That's all completely different.
The law, the reason
she said something different. She is saying
herself by her own.
Quickly,
would you vote for? We got to get out.
Yes, I would. The reason
all right, that's all I want to know. Issue 3, the Guantanamo redemption.
Guantanamera, Guajira Guantanamera, Guantanamera, Guajira Guantanamera.
Instead of serving as a tool to counter terrorism, Guantanamo became a symbol that helped al-Qaeda recruit terrorists to its cause. Indeed, the existence of Guantanamo likely created more terrorists around the world than it ever detained.
I hereby order. And we then provide the process whereby Guantanamo will be closed no later than 1 year from now.
The Guantanamo prison facility is located on the southeastern tip of Cuba at the U.S.'s 16-square-mile Guantanamo Bay Naval Base, the area of which is under perpetual lease from Cuba. Since the 9/11 attacks, 775 prisoners have been detained in Gitmo. 420 have been released without charge. 74 have returned or are suspected to return to terrorism against the U.S. 240 detainees remain. Closing the facility means that Guantanamo detainees will be housed in federal prisons and tried in federal courts and military tribunals, all located on American soil. The first Gitmo detainee is being tried now in New York. Closing of Guantanamo is not popular with a majority of Republicans and Democrats in both the Senate and the House. They said no to giving the president the $60 to $80 million he wants to close Guantanamo.
I think the tribunals can occur anywhere, and I would prefer not to see them occur in America, within the continental United States.
The reality is that there's no point in having some kind of facility in the United States where these people are kept if it can be done in Guantanamo, and it can be done there perfectly safely.
As for Americans at large, 65% oppose closing Guantanamo and oppose trials in the United States and oppose any Gitmo detainees in the United States. 32% approve. So, a consensus of Americans, if you believe the polls, say forget about closing Guantanamo.
Question, is it perilous for Obama to disregard public opinion in this regard? I ask you, Monica.
Yes, it is. Look at those poll numbers. The American people are absolutely adamant about not closing Guantanamo Bay. I was there 3 years ago. It is the ideal place to keep these terrorism suspects. Look, Obama announced the closure without having a plan in place, which, by the way, was the left's attack on President Bush in the waning years of Iraq, that he didn't have an exit strategy. There is no exit strategy in place here for the world's most hardened jihadists.
Is it hygienic? Is it hygienic?
There are
And the other side,
what about food?
It is a state-of-the-art facility. These terrorists are treated extremely well with health care and medical services and food. The climate is gorgeous.
Do you think it's a rehab? Is it a rehab center?
No, to begin with, they're suspected terrorists. I know you don't like to use that term; makes people sound soft, but
they're
that's
there because
listen.
they're Boy
Listen,
Scouts.
what's the
point?
We have Uyghurs who have been there for 7 years who have done nothing wrong, and we can't even take them back in this country. In Virginia, no, they've been declared non-enemy combatants. We have nothing against them.
Hold on, what do you think?
Look, you know, it has become a symbol, and a bad symbol for America without question. On the other hand, there are practical problems here that you are now encountering. I don't think we're going to be able to overcome the commitment of closing it. We're going to have a very difficult time dealing with these prisoners. We have to be very careful in dealing with them because we cannot disclose sources and methods.
Let's get a couple of things.
Wait
a minute. Hold on.
We have a dozen people.
Contain yourself.
Supermax.
I want to know this. Is it the current thinking of Obama that he doesn't want these prisoners back here? Will he take them in prison, or the ones who?
He's got a real problem in that some of these prisoners, if they come back here, will not be able to be tried. We do not know how to do that.
Will any other country accept them? If we reject them,
so far, virtually nobody.
The OAS.
Guantanamo will be closed. The Secretary of Defense supports it. He says it's an
supports what? The closing.
He supports the closing. He says it's an advertisement for jihadists.
Will the Republicans put up a real fight against Sotomayor? Yes or no?
Not if they have a minimal intelligence.
Quickly.
I agree.
Yes,
I agree.
they will.
With what? No.
Yeah. Yes, they will.
No, they're going to fold.
Answer is they will fold. Don't forget to follow the McLaughlin Group on Twitter.
We've provided a platform for success for some of the most respected companies in the country. We fueled their growth with a highly educated workforce and a can-do, pro-business attitude. Just ask our trusted business partner, Toyota. Visit Mississippi.org to see what we can do for you.
If, for such a small word, it packs a wallop. If I live to 100, if Social Security isn't enough, if my heart gets broken, if she says yes. We believe if should never hold you back. If should be managed with a plan that builds on what you already have. Together, we can create a personal safety net, a launching pad for all those brilliant ifs in the middle of life. You can call on our expertise and get guarantees for the if in life. After all, we're MetLife.